Okay, it is 6:05 and we will call the Community Development Committee meeting to order on February 21st, 2023. And in attendance, we have myself, Councilmember Johnson, and Councilmember Christensen. Councilmember Mayhew is not currently present, but we'll see if he comes a little bit later. Okay, that takes us to the agenda. Unless there are any changes, we'll go ahead and adopt the agenda as it is. Okay, then we will approve the agenda as presented. That takes us to public comments. And I do see, okay. Real quick, we do have Councilmember Mayhew. If we could get him promoted.
Yep.
Thanks.
That's better.
Excellent. Real quick, Councilmember Mayhew, if I could just get a mic check.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Excellent.
Hello from the other Washington.
Oh, great. I hope you're having fun. All right. We had just entered the public comments section, and we do have Mr. Scheel present. So we'll give Mr. Scheel about 3 minutes.
Okay, and I wasn't sure, like at this point is when I would comment on the urban growth area planning thing, or do you do public comment on that specifically when you get to that agenda item?
I think that it'd be best for us to follow the council practice. So we'll go ahead and and I'll acknowledge you when we get to that, but it's basically going to be the only thing. So just hold tight for just a second.
Sure, no problem.
Okay. Then instead, we'll go to the minutes, unless there are any changes suggested from council, we will adopt them as they are. Okay, then the minutes are approved. And that takes us to our one item, the UGA. So again, I'll open us up for public comment here. So let's go ahead and unmute Mr. Scheel and give him about 3 minutes.
So am I still unmuted from a moment ago?
Yes, you are unmuted.
Okay, great. And so this isn't a big comment. I just wanted to kind of toss in one thought item as the committee and then the council and the other commissions and things engage in planning that would be relating to urban growth, which is that not only is what land is buildable an important consideration, but also what water is available for any growth, regardless of which land it happens to be on. I know that when the council several years ago was considering Snoqualmie Hills West, the main reason it was decided to not go with that proposal was lack of water. And, you know, of course, some smaller pieces of the land wouldn't have quite the same water requirement as that, but, you know, just, you know, it's like other infrastructure like roads, you can build more roads, you can build more sewage treatment plants, but you can't create more water. And so I just wanted to remind the committee and the council that water limitations, I think, are a major thing. That's all I have. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much for your comment. And I don't see anyone else present online or in council chambers to give comment on this. So that will take it to us, the council. Before we get started, just wanted to check in with Mr. Rogers to see if you had any sort of intro material that you wanted to make us aware of.
Thank you, Chair. We did provide a memo to the committee, which attempts to briefly summarize both the history of how the UGA and the potential annexation area came into existence and some of the city's more recent history with annexations, and then also provided some details at a high level on the 2017 Snoqualmie Hills West proposal and briefly why the City Council opted to reject that proposal at that time. So certainly here, you know, try to be resource to the committee in answering questions. We included both and I will call it a preliminary draft map of potentially buildable areas within the Snoqualmie Hills potential annexation area that covers both west and east. I call it a preliminary draft. Certainly it says draft on there, but that's something that continues to be under review by the administration as far as, you know, what lands might be available, what lands might not be available. And then the other thing we included was the obviously very conceptual site plan for the Snoqualmie Hills West proposal from 2017, showing at least how that proposal would have, in broad terms, divided the area up and developed it.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, committee members. Committee members. So you listening in there. Can you hear me, Councilmember Mayhew? Okay, good. Okay, so for myself, one of the things I wanted to make sure I was clear of is on the map that we got here, the buildable lands analysis, those little bubbly cloud-looking shapes, those are rough estimates of critical areas. Is that correct?
Yes. One second. Let me pull it up on the screen so people can see what we're talking about here.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So this is the map. I apologize. It will look tiny on people's various tiny or hopefully maybe not tiny screens. So what you're seeing down here, these kind of carve out areas along the south side here or in the middle, those are excluding critical areas, whether they be wetlands, streams, steep slope areas. Same thing here when you go out to the end of 80th. So gives you a pretty decent idea of, in broad terms, where critical areas are going to be.
And these other lighter tan-ish colors that are more grid-like, what is the reason that those are not considered to be in the darker brown shade? Is it slope? Is it current land use? Is it who owns it? Just curious, a little bit of clarity as to why those are not also in the darker color.
So what you see in the note down here, it says removed parcels with a present use designation of SFR, meaning single family residential, mobile homes, or a public or utility designation. And so that's taken straight from the King County Assessor's database of what's the current use of the property. And so, you're going to see certainly all this land over here in the Williams Edition, for example, is excluded. What that also means, of course, is that some of these areas up here in Snoqualmie, what is the eastern part of Snoqualmie Hills West, are also excluded because today they are used as single-family homes. These are roughly 5-acre lots for reference. And so that's one of the reasons why I call it kind of a preliminary draft, is that we are taking those areas out at the moment and focusing really on what's more vacant. And that's more what you're seeing with the darker browns. But as we saw in the 2017 proposal, one of the main things that a potential developer or master planner could be looking for in Snoqualmie Hills is assembling those properties that are currently under a number of owners and trying to bring them all in together. Because it's been a number of years since the last proposal, I don't know where that might, where those particular landowners' views might sit, although most, if not all of them, were willing to sell 5-6 years ago. That may not have changed. Certainly some of the homes would have sold since then, just typical market turnover, if you will. But some or all of them may again be willing to sell for the right price to the right developer. I think as we move through this analysis, because this, you can see the data on this is back from end of October 2022, so it's last fall. As we continue this, we'll refine this map more to get a better idea. But I think on the low end, what you're seeing, it says buildable land acres 98.31 down there. I think that's certainly the low end of what we're looking at, and as we continue this, that number might very well go up. For reference, this entire area in here, which was included in the 2017 proposal, is about 110 acres, give or take. So in broad terms, you'd be looking at roughly 200-ish acres developable out of a 260 or so acre Snoqualmie Hills West. So if we look at the proposal from 2017, you can see the boundaries they were included. So these are those currently single family home properties right in here that developer at the time had managed to take out options on their property or get those property owners on board, which are not included in the buildable lands map. So, and this is a 260 acre give or take proposal. that you see from 2017.
And also, that doesn't necessarily take into account changes in buffers. Is that correct?
Correct, and you can see that with these greens, they were trying to achieve that at the time. Certainly, any proposal going forward now would need to update that with current regulations, and things like that. As public comment pointed out, access will be an issue, and water supply would be, I think, the main issues with any development here. Access is surmountable. A lot of the other issues are surmountable. The water supply remains the largest issue.
Okay. Checking to see if there are any hands. Nope, not yet. Okay. A couple other thoughts that I had on this, or at least questions to clarify. So the administration is looking at the concept of a land swap. Is that correct? Can you kind of describe in broad terms what exactly that would entail?
Sure. Let me grab a different.
Since there may or may not be a whole lot of buildable land.
Sure. So let me grab a different map here so you can see that. So broadly speaking, what we're looking at with the land swap, okay, it is showing that, is the city has some areas down here by the interchange. So let me zoom in so you can see this a little better. So this is the hospital right here, and this is Panorama Apartments here. And then we have, of course, the vacant parcel known as S21B here next to the hospital. These lands here between the hospital and the interchange are currently outside the city's urban growth area and King County's urban growth area. So we couldn't annex them today even if we wanted to. It's illegal. One thing we're exploring through our regional partners and with King County is potentially swapping areas such as this one here, or potentially some of these areas over here, to bring them into the urban growth area. In exchange, we would swap lands elsewhere in the city. Let me turn on another layer so you can tell this one. So this is Snoqualmie Hills west and east here, and then there's also some areas in the city. For example, the Salish expansion area is not going to be developed. There's this small area just north of the former Salish expansion that is unannexed area within the urban growth area. We have this little sliver here, just north of the mill site, and then we have this portion here, which was part of the mill site PCI plan approval, but is not yet annexed. There are additional areas throughout the city that the city could potentially swap to bring some or all of these areas here into the urban growth area and therefore make them able to be annexed. In exchange, we would have to take areas out of the urban growth area. In broad terms, King County's, the countywide planning policies around these kinds of UGA adjustments require the land you're taking out of the UGA generally be open space areas. There's some newer state legislation that passed last year, I believe, that allows for different kinds of swaps, but King County hasn't yet implemented that state law. That's a process currently underway, being negotiated through the Growth Management Planning Council and King County.
Now, by open space, do you mean that it is developable but currently vacant, or by that do you mean more like critical areas that would not be developed, that are open and there aren't really buildings on them?
It could be both.
Okay.
Or either or. Okay. So that's something we're exploring, and we have certainly taken a look at how we could either do a one-to-one swap, so take these spaces that are either not going to be developed or couldn't be developed and taking them out of the urban growth area in exchange for these other areas that are potentially more developable, more easily able to be served by city services. So it's another attraction, if you will, of looking at a swap down here by the interchange, is that the city has infrastructure right by there. We have water lines, for example. We could extend sewer into that area with not excessive difficulty, for example. It's got better access both to I-90 and to Snoqualmie Parkway than, for example, some of these areas maybe across the river by the mill site. And we're also looking at, of course, is it, some of these areas that are within the urban growth area up on the hill here, certainly where Snoqualmie Casino is, and some of these areas down here by North Bend Way, are we ever really going to annex them? Or what are the tribes' potential future plans for these areas. And that's a conversation that, we slowly have with the Snoqualmie tribe as we work through our relationship with them. So there are a lot of, if you will, irons in the fire on this, and not a lot of clear answers. And that's partly because we're so early in this process. We have been working on this for, I don't know, Mike, how long have we been working on this ever since you got here, I think?
Today I got
Yeah.
here.
So the process is certainly continuing, and it continues to be a high priority for the administration to push this process along and try to get to get to some place with the countywide planning policies and our regional partners that we can make such a swap possible, because right now it's not possible. And we continue to look to that as we want to make this happen, because then we can do some swaps, which would just get some more buildable land into the city that we could use for whether it's affordable housing or some additional retail uses, potentially human services uses that, Councilmember Perry's office, King County Councilmember Perry's office is highly interested in uses like that. Yeah, and exactly, potentially a park and ride, which is another thing that, we keep looking at, and the mayor is, now on the regional transit committee and pushing really hard, understandably, for additional transit options over Highway 18. So it's a lot of things going on here.
Yeah, Councilmember Christensen.
Yeah, so my question, as we're looking at the buildable lands and doing potential swaps, are we also looking at what areas next to us would make sense for preserving as green space and limiting development that way? I'm trying to see if there's a way to avoid further fragmentation of the green spaces we have for the wildlife, basically.
Yeah, and that is definitely part of the conversation as we look to what areas could we swap out, and it's also an active part of the conversation with King County and our regional partners, because they share the same interest. We don't want to just start throwing this land and that land, and it doesn't connect anything or make any sense. But yes, actively that's being looked at.
Okay.
Am I understanding this correctly, that I want to be careful how I phrase this here, maybe Bob stop me, that the Snoqualmie Reservation is in the UGA?
That's correct.
Can we not have that? Is there a reason to have that in the UGA, or is that something that we could?
Bob, you want to take that, or I can start on that.
Well, there are cities, in Western Washington and elsewhere in the country that have tribal reservations within incorporated city borders. There isn't, I think, any limitation one way or the other. There's the impact that a reservation and being held in trust by the federal government that has on local, the application of local laws, whether it's police laws or land use or other laws, but it can be one way or the other, and is both across the country.
Okay. Well, I might have some follow-up for you, but I might do that via email.
Yeah. For a historical perspective there, back when the UGA was originally defined in the early 1990s, of course, the Snoqualmie tribe did not have federal recognition at the time. The casino did not exist. And so, and in addition, at that time, the UGA also encompassed, it came across I-90 here, and encompassed all of, the Snoqualmie Point Park area, and included all these areas kind of in here. These areas, of course, were later removed, as the memo noted. And so, and that happened in the early 2000s. At the time, the Snoqualmie tribe had just recently received federal recognition, or received federal recognition. And so they were in the process of planning this out, but had no firm plans. So certainly there have been some adjustments, and it's something we could look to, but there is no policy per se in the countywide planning policies.
Interesting. All right.
That might be a good discussion to get into at a later date.
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful to get more information on that, as well as options.
Yeah, especially, well, anyway, yeah, there's a lot that we can talk about there. Mr. Sturbank.
The only other thing I would add is that there are areas where being in or outside the city affects the way the city treats, for example, extension of utilities or utility supply. And so, and it bills, the code provides for the city to bill outside city customers differently. And that's led to some controversy with the tribe in the past. So now maybe that's solvable by other means, but there are, I guess that's just by way of, there are instances where being in the city actually might facilitate or make some things smoother rather than not there. And there are, of course, other considerations too that I'm sure the chair is aware of.
Okay. Other questions from the committee or thoughts? Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, so I wonder if we could scroll that screen just a bit so we get a better look at that whole UG area. Yeah, there we go. That's great.
Zoom it out a tick.
No, it's fine. Yeah, so kind of where the pointer is, that whole light green area. I think so. We've just gone through some discussion of some of the sort of small pieces. You know, the area down by the hospital. You know, some of the other small pieces. But the thing that seems to me is the really big area, the big UGA area, is exactly where the pointer is right now. I didn't really follow that concept of buildable lands. I think almost all of that land, or a significant portion of that land, is buildable, at least in, maybe that's a term of art, but just conceptually things could be built there. So just like the proposal that came to us, well, it was before I was on the council, but the proposal that came to take a lot of that UGA area and do a bunch of development and then ask us to annex that into the city. I think at the time, the feeling of the council was that the particular proposal that came forward was not a proposal that they were interested in, or they thought the city should be interested in. So it was turned down because basically the wrong proposal. So my thought is, you know, a developer spends a lot of money to put together a proposal like that. And so what happened there was a developer decided what they wanted, and it turned out to be not what the city wanted. So that didn't end well, meaning they didn't get to do that development, and the city didn't get a development done there because there just wasn't a meeting of interests. So my thought is that what would be helpful if the state is telling us this is to be developed, which they are, and they're saying this is to come into your city, which they are, then why don't we spend some time saying what kind of a development or what kind of features in a development would we be you know, favorably inclined to? So that way a developer could say, okay, if I could put together a proposal that meets that, then the city's going to be favorably inclined. So for example, if we go over to the left where the pointers go, right over to the left of the green, and we just right there where it's pointing now, this is an area that is that has some, gosh, I'm not going to use the right term, but it's not residential. It's buildings that house businesses, and there's some restaurants, and there's a grocery store and things like that. It might be that just as we move to the right of that would be something we would be open to in that area. And then it might be that we would only be interested if that came with something. Well, what would that something be? You know, do we want it to come with housing? Or is that not important to us? Or, you know, what did, you know, for that area, or how much of that area? If we could give guidance, then as we move, if we move the pointer more to the right, we start going down the hill, stuff in this area, if it included certain things we might be interested in, and if not, no. So in that case, we had I hope this is right. I think we had a lot of single family housing. Maybe we'd say, well, something that was a lot of single family housing, this is just an example. We might say not interested in that, but maybe that plus some multifamily housing, or that plus some local retail, or whatever it is that we might think would be that we would look favorably on. If we could develop that kind of guidance, and if we could get input from the community, so a developer would have some reliability that, hey, this community is open to something that's like this. They're not open to a Best Buy, but they might be open to multifamily housing that fit these look and feel, these characteristics, whatever. So it just seems to me that that might be something worth this committee's time, worth gathering input from the community on, providing some sense of what we would look favorably on in this area were a proposal to come, so the developer would know what that would look like. We get some community involvement in that. And again, why do any of this? Because this is tagged as UGA. The state is saying this is urban growth. That's what needs to happen here. So therefore, with that in place, why don't we sort of talk about, give guidance as to what we would look favorably on. So hopefully that all made some sense, but that's what I think is worth spending some time on. The other things we talked about, the administration is spending a lot of time on that. They're doing great work on that. They're going to figure that out. Something's going to be doable or not. They're going to figure out what is. I don't think they'll let us know if they want input from us. So I think that's great. Let those things carry on. I'm more thinking none of us are focused on this area right now. And it's sort of a big undertaking. Does it make sense to try and do something like that?
Councilman Christensen.
I certainly agree with Councilmember Mayhew, and I think that public input in that will be hugely important. My question is, so what would the vehicle look like for us to make, once we have discussions, what kind of a vehicle would we use to put council preferences and community preferences out there in front of developers so that we know what the next steps would look like?
So in broad terms, the current, if you will, vision for the area is defined in the comprehensive plan, and I'm pulling it up here so you can see what it is. I briefly described it in the memo, but a map helps. Let me find the right map here. Apologies. In short, the so-called vision, if you want to call it that, for Snoqualmie Hills West, so that's the, if you will, the hill portions, would be for, here we go. So this is from the current comprehensive plan. So this is the so-called Snoqualmie Hills West area. And so, broadly, this is the dividing line. We have on the left side here, it's called for Master Planned Business Park, is the light, this bluish color. And then
Sorry,
this.
just a point of information.
The wrong page.
Point of information.
Oh, sorry.
Not showing up on the screen.
There we go. Okay, sorry, I forgot to hit the right button. Okay, apologies about that. Anyway, this blue area here is noted as a master planned business, let me read that, business park, there we go. And so in broad terms, we have kind of interpreted that to be an extension or continuation of the existing Snoqualmie Ridge Business Park, if you will. And there could be some adjustments, tweaks to it. And then you have the eastern part of the hill area, because there is a little plateau or a bench there, identified for what is termed innovative mixed use. And that has really been oriented around, at least as the comprehensive plan describes it, developments that would help holistically meet comprehensive plan goals around, things like green buildings, planned environmental outcomes, provide extra park facilities beyond development requirements. And so it's really, and also potentially senior or assisted living or planned retirement communities. And so that has been the vision that was articulated back in 2014. And that was partly why we saw the development proposal in 2017 that we did. That proposal was for 800 to 1,200, 55 or better, as the term of art is, housing units with a relatively small, commercial area on the western side. The council at the time decided that was not what they wanted to see. And certainly in the intervening almost decade since the current comprehensive plan was adopted, we have, of course, seen shifts in what both the community's goals and the city council's goals around housing are. Whereas in 2014, there's a lot of emphasis on the environmental sustainability aspects of it, making it green. And now we're looking a little more toward, of course, really needing affordable housing. It's not that we don't want the environmentally sustainable aspects of it, but the balance, if you will, may have shifted. And that's something for the council to really figure out. And then, of course, continuing on, you see the Snoqualmie Hills East area, which is really the area that's effectively on the valley floor, which runs roughly kind of northwest to southeast along here, is where kind of you get down onto the valley floor and into the floodplain. That's designated to remain this lower density residential under the current version of the comprehensive plan. And so, but again, this is the comprehensive plan. This is a policy document. The council has a lot of discretion to think about and change. And this is really where the vision for this annexation area is coming from right now. So the vehicle, sorry, to get back to answer your question, is we have a comprehensive plan update process underway right now. That's a great vehicle for saying, what do we want this to be? What do we want it to look like? What things do we want to see? The council will obviously decide, but we also, of course, have our public input plan to help inform these things.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, that's fantastically helpful. I think, I think Mr. Rogers kind of hit on some of this. It seems to me that whatever is in our comprehensive plan currently turned out to send that developer down a path that actually ended up being not what the council was willing to accept. So clearly it seems to me that more guidance or different guidance or revising what's in there at a minimum so that a developer could say, well, wait a minute, why was that thing not what you said? Let's change what we said so that it becomes clear why that thing wasn't what we liked. So that's, I think, a great opportunity. And so, so that's number one. Number two, as Mr. Rogers pointed out, so things have changed. One of the big things that's changed, he alluded to several that are very important, or stated several that are very important. One other is, I think, there's this idea when we look at the PSRC regional plan of a bunch of housing coming into our city. And so I think we all know, if we look at the current boundary and just look at what's there, you kind of scratch your head and wonder, how could we ever end up anywhere even remotely close to that? So then it's, okay, if we do have an intention to try and do something in that direction, is this UGA, should we be thinking differently about this UGA? And should we be communicating, hey, if something was more like X than Y, that actually might be something we'd look favorably on because it matches up with our revised plan, which will be will be somewhat aligned, at least with attempting to align anyway with the PSRC plan and so on. So it seems like maybe there's a lot of work we could do in this regard. And yes, that'll be there'll be public input. There'll be the whole process of redoing the comprehensive plan. That sounds fantastic. My thought is let's, tightly be part of that. But it also seems that there's some work for the council to do here as well in terms of the specific guidance, A, that somehow wasn't understood, and then B, maybe revised guidance for all the different things, maybe what I've said, maybe what Mr. Rogers was saying, various things that might cause us to give different guidance and hopefully maybe better guidance that would match up for a developer. So does that make sense?
I want to go to Mr. Sturbank real quick.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. And just real quick to tag on to Mr. Rogers' comments, there's also a process under the GMA, if you wanted, or if the timing with the comprehensive plan wasn't favorable, to do what's called a sub-area plan, which is essentially like a breakout chapter, follows the same process that could focus more intensely on this area and contain more detail than, for example, the elements the way they're currently prepared. But as Mr. Rogers said, we're kicking off the entire plan, so it may make sense just to do it then, but just wanted to apprise you of that other option as well.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Christensen.
Sorry, it was just a follow-up question on that. So City Attorney Sturbank, to the extent that we wanted to put guardrails or additional guardrails on that particular area, would it be better to do it through the comp plan or through a sub-area plan, especially if we were focused on doing newer, different, or additional requirements for building codes and things like that?
Let's see, building code. So typically, the council wouldn't adopt building codes for an area that's not yet annexed, except to the extent there's a process known as pre-annexation zoning, where and I think that the previous councils did that for Snoqualmie Ridge 1 and 2 areas, perhaps, or other areas. So that sort of would follow whether the comprehensive plan or follow a sub-area plan to spell out particular requirements that would kick in when and if the area was annexed.
Okay. Thanks. I was just trying to think if there's a way to get ahead of potential issues if we saw some potentially coming down the pike.
Yes, and that would be a way to do it. Typically, those pre-annexation zoning ordinances are tied to effective dates of annexations so that they avoid the need for follow-up action by the council.
Okay, thank you.
Something that I'm wondering is then what would be an ideal process for getting to what those final goals are for this area that would end up in the comprehensive plan. There'd be gathering public input, of course. There's probably some involvement of the Planning Commission. There's this committee. There's, of course, the administration's very hard work that they're already very deep into. So what's kind of the best practice for getting to what Councilmember Mayhew was suggesting as sort of a vision, as something that we could have, that we could present to developers and say, hey, here's the thing. If you do this, there's a decent chance, no promises, that, council would look favorably upon it.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think where it really starts is the council articulating in broad terms what the vision for this area needs to be. And I'm not talking about getting super specific, but to the extent of, the current vision says whatever it says. And it's really the council indicating, is that appropriate, or do you want to change it? And if you want to change it, kind of in what tweaks are you looking at, or are you looking for a wholesale revision? Because then the administration can take that and we can work with the Planning Commission on really getting down to the brass tacks of, well, what do the policies need to be for this area? How are we going to word a vision so that we can, and then you get into, of course, the public input process of, okay, this is what we've got now. What input are we going to get that's going to be helpful or that people want to see in it? Obviously, we're going to need to go back and pick up a lot of the other site constraints, water, access, how and all those issues, because the water issue isn't going to get solved by doing a comprehensive plan update. And then, of course, the council makes the final decision, with additional discussion of what's going to come from the Planning Commission and administration on that front. So to that extent, this discussion is helpful. And this committee and the council putting some additional points on, here's what the vision is right now in the current comprehensive plan, and we want to keep that, we want to change it. And just to give some general direction to the administration and the Planning Commission as we work toward adjustments we need to make to the land use element of the comprehensive plan.
So what I'm hearing is that what would be one path forward would be for us essentially as a committee to look at what currently exists as in the comprehensive plan, decide what it is that we want to do differently, to some degree how specific we'd like to get, and then forward, would it be something like a resolution to the rest of the council? And then if that got the thumbs up from the council, then the administration could take it to Planning Commission, et cetera.
It doesn't need to be so formal as a resolution.
Okay.
This could even be a consensus of the council type of thing. You don't even need to necessarily make a motion. I think we can generally get the idea of what the council, a majority or the council as a body is thinking without having to go through such formalities there.
Okay. But it should go to, after us, to the full council so that they at least have the opportunity to comment.
That would be my suggestion,
Yeah.
yes. But again, I'm not going to tell.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you're the council member, so.
Seems like to me. Okay, so what do we want to do? The world is our oyster, sort of. Yeah, one of the things that comes to mind to me, of course, is the issue of density, where cities develop within existing cities that already are there, and you can't go back to the drawing board and recreate them in some fantasy land, right? So while there are certain levels of density that I wish that could be in different places in our city, they're not there. So one of the things that we'll need to do is kind of think about, essentially the profile that we want this area to have. Would it make sense to have 5-on-1s in some part of it? Or Councilmember Mayhew was suggesting in some areas having single family housing. Do we need that big of a business park, and how much businessy do we want that business park to be? Those are just all the kinds of things that we're going to have to wrestle with. So I don't know if any of the committee members have suggestions right now for what exactly they're looking for. I mean, I'd be certainly happy to hear it, but I wonder if we need to maybe do a little bit of homework ourselves and bring back some ideas. Maybe look through that section of the comprehensive plan. Is that something Mr. I want to say Mr. Smith. I don't know why I want to say Mr. Smith. Mr. Rogers, is that something you could just pull out, like the words description in this map, and send it to the committee so we could peruse that?
Yes, absolutely. I can do that.
That'd be helpful. Councilmember Christensen.
I personally would like to take some time and do some homework and
Yeah.
look into it further, because this is just, obviously the implications of these discussions are quite significant on the community. But I would like to get ahead of it to the extent that we can, so that we have as much say in ensuring that the residents have as much say as possible in what's going to be hopefully coming back towards us for consideration.
Yeah, Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, I just really strongly agree with the point that Councilmember Christensen just made. I think, the comprehensive plan is a big thing that we're doing, and we hopefully we'll get a lot of public input, but there's so much there that I think I worry that I worry about the ability of the community to really focus on the most important things, on some of the things, because there's so much to look at, right? There's so much to consider and give input on. And sometimes, in order for the community to really give a good input, they sort of almost need something to react to, right? Hey, do you like orange or do you like green? Gets you a different response than if you say, what's your favorite color? So, what's your favorite color might get a lot of colors, I'm okay with it. Whereas, wait, green, I hate green. What do you mean green? So sometimes if we can, maybe if we can really go down this path that is what I at least read into what Councilmember Christensen was saying, of trying to develop some thoughts and then try to put those thoughts in front of the community to say, hey, what's your reaction to this? Might get us a lot more valuable sense, a lot broader sense of what the community wants. I mean, just take tonight, we had this on the agenda. We had one citizen show up and talk about something that's very important to them and they think should be important to us, which of course it is. That's great. But one is not as good as, more than one. So I think I just think an idea of better guidance from the council and then a sense of a community, some sort of broad sense of a community behind that would be a really great outcome if we could get to it.
All right. Any other thoughts right off? Okay, I feel like we have some homework as council members, and as we have time throughout the year, we'll bring this topic back. It may or may not be at the next meeting. It kind of depends on if there are urgent things that come before us and stuff. But we'll keep bringing it back as we're able to. Okay. Any final thoughts? All right. If not, I believe that was the end of our agenda. Let me just double check to make sure. Yes. So without objection, I will consider us adjourned at 6:51. Thank you.